it's my privilege to be here today. This was not a great month in the Kirk home. It started pretty great. April 30th, I had a chance to fly from California to Colorado Springs. Chance to be a keynote speaker at DCPI's banquet for raising funds to train church planners. It was a great evening. Started the day actually with meeting a new friend named Ron Forsyth, a man who I'd never met before. But Ron helps raise funds, and he wanted to help me as I'm helping raise funds for DCPI. And we sat and had lunch together at PF Chang, just another normal day for me to meet this new guy and to get to know him better. And almost all the way through lunch, he looked over and he said, I feel like I have to ask you this, Scott, have you ever heard of the Wisdom Challenge? I said, no, I haven't, Ron. And he said, well, a number of years ago, I was really struggling in my walk with God, and I felt like God spoke to me and said, Ron, you need to eat spiritually before you eat physically every morning. And so what I've been doing the last few years, I've been reading a chapter of Proverbs every day, depending on what day it is. Today's May 1st, and I just read Proverbs 1. And what I do is I correspond with a few friends, and if you'd like to be a part of it, I'd love to invite you into the challenge. I said, well, Ron, that'd be amazing. I leave for Africa tomorrow morning. I don't know what my Wi-Fi is going to be like there, but I'd love to jump into that with you. And so this little chance encounter with Ron really became a launching pad for the month that I didn't know that I needed, but God knew that I needed. Thursday and Friday, after being with DCPI that night, and it was a great night, by the way, we raised $15,000, which is a great amount of money. We found at DCPI that it takes about $30 to train a leader. That's for the translation, for the training of the person. If you put all the funds together, it costs about $30 to train a leader. Not much. We're a pretty lean machine. And so we also realized that every leader we train plants 2.55 churches. Now, some of them don't plant any. About a third of them don't plant any. They decide after being there, I don't want to plant a church. God hasn't called me to this. But others plant many churches. And so that evening, if research is like it's been, we basically helped plant in the next 5 years about 1,275 churches. So it was an evening very well worth my time and is a pleasure to be a part of. The next couple days I flew to Africa, which was not much fun. It was a 25-hour flight. We flew into Amsterdam and then eventually into Dar es Salaam and finally landed in Tanzania, in Kilimanjaro. And a long flight, about 25 hours, plus the time that we lost because we're flying that direction. And so I landed on late Friday night, exhausted. The manager at the hotel picked me up and brought me back to the hotel. It was Saturday the next day, so I had a day to rest and relax because nothing was happening that day. And so I got a chance to read and relax and catch up, and was really excited for the adventure God had ahead of me. I've been in Tanzania now about 5 or 6 times. You've helped send me there with these leaders, and just a great work with these 25 leaders we've been working with the same group, teaching them different tracks and mentoring them, helping them plant churches. And it's just been a really rewarding time. I was so excited because on Monday, my friends from Kenya were coming over, our master trainers. And I was going to spend Monday training them on this new house church planting track so that Tuesday they could train the track. Unfortunately, Monday was not a good day for me. Sunday was a typical Africa day. I got up early, went to church. They were a half hour late picking me up, which is pretty typical. We drove in about an hour to church, up a hill to Mount Meru. Roads were washed out, which is pretty typical on a rainy season. And we kept going up, further than I thought we'd ever go. And we they finally dropped us off and said, you're going to have to walk the last half mile because we just can't get any further than this. I thought, well, that's pretty typical. So we got to the church. Amazing church service. I got a chance to preach. I preach in English. They translate to Swahili. I'm the one English guy there. I'm the one white guy there. I'm the one English speaker there. I stand out. But it was a great time. And church was not like Rancho Chapel, which is a normal service, about an hour 15 minutes. It was an hour and 15 minutes, and I sat down, and then church continued for another 2 or 3 hours. And so 4 hours into church, I thought, I think I'm done. I love Jesus, but I've had enough church for today. I'm not feeling really good. And then they decided to have lunch together, and I didn't want to eat because I was not feeling well. We drove home, and on the way home, I fell asleep. And on the way home, our truck broke down, which is pretty typical. So we walked, and we got to go meet the daughter church of this church that we had planted, which they were excited to show me, and I inside was excited. My body was not excited. My mind wanted to be excited. My body was not feeling well. And so we walked about a half mile in the rain. Yes, like your parents used to say, both ways, uphill both ways in the rain. And they tried to work on the truck for a while first because apparently they didn't have gas in it. That really hurts a truck. But more than that, it was also a transmission issue. So they put gas in, then they cleaned the terminals for the battery, got it jumped. It started, but it wouldn't move forward, so it was still a problem. And then we got into public transportation, and then we walked to the other church. Public transportation is not like a bus here in Riverside. It's a van filled with everyone and their brother and sister and a few animals. And I sat in sick, not feeling good, feeling sorry for myself, and wondering, gosh, when is this day going to be over? Well, the day was finally over about 9 o'clock when I got back home that evening. It had just been a long day, and I found my friend Hudson, our friend from from Kenya, who'd come over. And he was waiting for me. He said, let's eat dinner. I said, I don't feel good. Hudson, I'm sick. And he said, well, tomorrow you can train us. I said, I'm going to give it my best. But unfortunately, in the morning, I woke up and was sick. And when I vomited, I realized I need to get to the hospital. So the manager took me to the hospital, which is across the street. Now it's a love medicine, but this was an emerging country. It is an emerging country. And so I felt quickly, oh my gosh, we're in trouble here. They charged me 16,000 shillings, which I was worried about until I found out that was about $10. And so it's pretty okay. All my medical bills there for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday being in the hospital amounted to $80. And so it was a fair deal. I got some IVs. I was sick. I was not feeling good. And I realized that I wasn't going to be able to train these Kenyans. And so on Tuesday, I trained the Tanzanians. I was just sick. I was sick in my stomach. I was just not feeling well. I did not realize what was actually happening was that I was dehydrated, massively dehydrated, more than I had known. And so I'm now carrying my hydro flask around everywhere I go. And but that afternoon I trained house church planting on my own, which is not advised, especially when you're an American who speaks English, and it has to be translated in Swahili, and you're sick. So I trained, and there were breakout sessions. So I said, now guys, go discuss this. And I hate to be PG-13 here, but I'd walk outside and vomit over the railing and come back in and teach some more. And I just thought, this is it's got to get done. I got to get through this. I got to be done. I have to finish. And the nice man from Tanzania was holding his umbrella over my head as I was vomiting in the rain, and feeling very sorry for myself. I am, like most of you men, I'm such a wuss when I'm sick, and big wimp. And I wondered, am I going to get home? I've got a 25-hour flight ahead of me, and I don't feel good. I went back to the hospital on Tuesday. Went back to the hospital on Wednesday. On Wednesday, I told the guys, you're going to have to train by yourself today. I can't do it. I've set you guys up. You can finish the training. And they did. And I went back to the hospital because that evening I was going to fly home. I called my insurance agent and said, what if I can't fly? What do I do? They said, we can book you another flight. Called my wife and said, honey, I'm hoping I get home. Just pray for me. And I sat in this hospital, which was it's a nice word for a clinic, and got some IVs. And then was taken over to Kilimanjaro Airport, about an hour drive, and began throwing up again. I thought, oh, Lord, please let me get home. Hiding myself, breaking all the laws, trying to get on a plane, which is not really a wise thing, but I want to get home. And saying, God, just get me to Amsterdam and then get me back to the U.S. And thankfully, I was able to get back home. Unfortunately, when I got home, I wasn't quite home yet because we had a North American summit. I felt like I still feel sick, but I'm feeling better. And so I went to this North American summit with a group of leaders, and when my boss saw me there, she said, you need to go home. And so the next morning I booked a flight and flew home early and got home. Unfortunately, as I was in Amsterdam, I lost my cell phone. life before cell phones was so much easier. Life after cell phones, not so easy. Because my poor wife got the last call from me at Kilimanjaro Airport. I was going to call her when I landed and got Wi-Fi in Amsterdam, but now I didn't have a phone. And so she waited about 20 hours to hear from me when I landed in Delta's hub of Atlanta. And I got on my computer, was able to text her through my computer. And he said, I'm fine. And she said, well, I've been worried and praying for you and wondering where you've been the last 24 hours. She had my itinerary, but didn't know what had happened. And so the next morning she said, you need to go to the hospital. You need to check me sure you haven't brought home some disease, which I was concerned for. And dengue fever, malaria, none of those sound very good, especially in the Kirk home. I don't want to bring that home. I had broken the law, I think, to get on the airplane, but I didn't want to bring that home to my friends here in America. And so I went to urgent care, and they did tests on me. They took some samples and blood, and the doctor came back in, and my wife met me there because I sent my son home. I said, hey, son, I'm fine. I'll call you in a couple hours when I'm done. It's going to take a while. Urgent care just takes forever. And he said, you're very sick. He said, the good news is you don't have any disease. We ruled out infectious disease because you don't have a fever. And we checked different samples. You don't have any of that, but you're an acute kidney failure. And I don't know if you've gotten that news before that is surprising, that you don't expect, that you feel healthier than you ever felt. And yet you've been sick, but you wonder, how am I going to get rid of this, stuff? And now the doctor's saying, you need to go to the emergency room now. I thought, well, can we talk a little bit about, help me out? And he said, no, there's no time to talk, Mr. Kirk. It's time for you to go now. He said, you need to leave. Your wife will take you. I'm not going to order an ambulance, but you need to leave now, and I'm sending you ahead to Palomar. I got the records that are waiting for you. You need to leave now and go. So, well, can I get my printout of my sheets? I don't understand. He said, well, I'll give you the printouts, but you need to leave now. So on the way in the car, I just began falling apart, going, okay, God, this is not what I expected. And my wife is driving, and she's on her cell phone, on speakerphone, talking to my brother-in-law, who's a doctor, and letting him know what's going on. And says, well, Scott's got these scores that are concerning. He said, yeah, I understand. Well, tell me what the score, what's his creatinine score? Now understand, the creatinine score, I'd had a physical back in March, and my score was in the normal range, which was under 1.3. It's supposed to be under 1.3. That's a normal range for your creatinine level. And Kathy over the phone said, well, Scott's at 14.65. She said, no. He said, no, you're reading that wrong, Kathy. You don't understand it. And as a loving brother said, you're wrong. That can't be true. And then he realized that I'm on the phone listening. And I say, Scott, his name also. I said, Scott, am I going to die? And he suddenly becomes a doctor again. No, you're not going to die. But he's still a brother. He says, no, you're really jacked up. But you're not going to die. But you need to get to the emergency room now because that score is not normal. Come to find out, the doctor, my nephrologist, walked in a couple hours, 5 hours later, and said, wow, 14.65, that's an impressive score. Thank you very much. I waited in the emergency room, or made it in the waiting room, and I got some blood work done, and then they wanted to do an ultrasound of my kidneys. And I remember the fear of going back by myself, being pushed back, having to go back in the wheelchair, and then laying on the bed, laying on the mat, and doing my best to try and get in the right position, thinking, okay, if I can get this the right place, maybe it'll make my kidneys look really good. I'm just not thinking correctly. And wondering what in the world is going on. Finally, I get put into a waiting room, and doctor comes in, nephrologist comes in, and it's when he says, you're impressive. I thought, well, thank you very much. He said, well, the good news is that your kidneys look normal. I said, so they're functioning fine? He said, I can't tell how they're functioning. It's just the structure. The structure's a little atrophy. There's no cysts. I don't see anything like this. This is acute. This is new, but it is serious. And all I can think is, okay, I'm 53 and I feel like I'm in the best shape of my life, and yet here I'm sitting without kidneys. And I wonder, okay, am I going to need like a transplant? Do I need dialysis? No, we hope not. We hope your kidneys can bounce back. But if I ask you, do you want to live? Oh, I'll say yes. Yes, give me dialysis, please. He said, let's just see what happens. You need lots of hydration. You need lots of rest. And it's not going to be quick. So I was in the hospital for a while, but the great thing is that I wasn't there alone. My wife was with me, but I wasn't alone with my wife. My wife texted my boss, Paul and Kathy Becker, and they immediately put word out, and my friend Steve Goldberg got news, and he showed up the next morning to Rancho Chapel, and I was prayed for by you. The word went out to our leaders around the world, and I was prayed for by leaders in Asia and Africa and Latin America. My coworker, Aaron, whose parents moved to Tennessee about a year and a half ago, in their little church, prayed for the Scott Kirk guy who was in acute kidney failure. My friend Larry Barker, who I'd seen in Texas at this North America Summit, prayed for me at his church in Texas. I was prayed for in Arkansas. I was prayed for people, and just it was amazing to know that the prayer chain had begun. And as Kathy said, there's not much more that we do that's as important as taking our request to God. Because when we pray, we say, God, we need your help. We can't fix this. And I learned a lot of lessons over the last few weeks. I think the biggest lesson I learned is that the little things really are the big things. It's amazing how excited I was that I had blue socks on. That may not mean a lot to you, but you've been in the hospital, you understand this. If you're given blue socks, that means that you're mobile. You can actually get up and walk. And I saw some people in yellow socks, and I thought, oh, they can't move. The doctor came in and said, thankfully, we don't have to give you a catheter. I said, oh, thank you, you don't have to give me a catheter. I had blue socks, and so I could walk around. They asked me on day 2, what's your religious persuasion? That's a really good way of asking it, religious persuasion. I'm a Christian. Okay, would you be open to a chaplain? And I thought, how do I say no to someone like me coming to visit me, you know? And so I said, sure, I'd love a chaplain to come and hang out with me. And 2 days later, a chaplain came and visited me. Second day, my friends from DCPI came and visited. The first night, as I was being wheeled back after the ultrasound, my friend Scott Last, who I work with, my leader of North Africa, Middle East stand countries, showed up with his wife on their anniversary because he wanted to see me. The last time I'd seen Scott in the hospital, I was visiting him when he had hit his head about 6 years ago. And I said, Scott, I like being on your end and not my end. But there are times where life surprises us. My daughter Kelsey, who's a sophomore in college, was finishing up her finals, and she called scared and asked, Mom, is Dad going to die? And I got on and said, no, Dad's not dying. Dad's jacked up, your Uncle Scott said. But I just need rest. She had her biggest final on Monday. She called me on Saturday night, just concerned. She finished up her finals on Thursday and drove 8 hours to come home to be with me. And I said, oh, honey, our house is boring when I was healthy. I think we confirmed she'll never want to come home now after this last visit. But she wanted to be with us. She said, I want to be with you, Dad. And the little things really were the big things. When Steve came in with our translations team, he said, oh, by the way, you need to know there are people at Rancho who are praying for you. I said, I heard. Steve He said, no, I need to tell you the story. He told me the story. And they said, also, there's a prayer blanket you'll get next time you're here. There's a group of people who are putting a blanket together. That's what they do when someone is hurting, and they pray over it, and they are praying for you, and I can't wait to give it to you. I thought, what a tangible reminder of what the body of Christ is like when life surprises us. One of the big surprises was my dad called me, and my dad and I have had a rocky relationship, I guess you'd call it. And he said, hey, son, you need to find out what blood type you are. Because I've got good kidneys. And I thought, well, Dad, I didn't say this, but I'm thinking, Dad, I'm not really in the market for a 75-year-old kidney, but thanks a lot. Only for a second I thought that. But what I realized is here's my dad my wife said, man, it's amazing that God brings amazing things out of horrible things. I thought, well, I wish it wouldn't have come out of this horrible thing, but you're right. My dad and I have been talking every other day, sometimes every day. There's a long ways to go, but it's amazing what God does when life surprises us. My friend Michael came in to the hospital on, I think, day 4. Michael, about a month and a half ago, was parked with his family on the side of the freeway. And a drug driver ran into their van. And he lost his 14-year-old son. Michael had his eye damaged. He's got a patch, which he bravely wears as a pirate and kind of is making fun of himself. But in the middle of this grieving thing, he comes to visit me, and I think, how in the world do I get comforted from a guy who I should be comforting? But he shares with me and talks with me and prays with me, and we lived in Psalm 46 for a while. And that's what I want to share with you this morning. This psalm written for a group of people who needed to remember that God is there even when life surprises us. Life is not always easy. Life is often not what we expect. Boy, I speak a lot longer than I expect to. The video we shared, Laura Story's blessings. She wrote when she was struggling with understanding what blessings mean. She said, I understand blessings as things that are good, like God bless this food, God bless America, God bless me. She said, but I went through a season where my husband was ill and he wasn't getting better. And I was praying for God's blessing and I wasn't getting the answer that I wanted. And I was just struggling. And she said she began to realize that sometimes God's blessings don't look like we expect them to. And she wrote that, what if your blessings come through raindrops? What if your healing comes through tears? What if 1,000 sleepless nights are what it takes to know you're near? What if the trials of this life are your mercies in disguise? She said God used that season to draw her closer to Him than she had ever been before. She was unexcited about the season. In fact, that season drew up more questions than answers for her. More struggles than solutions. But she knew that God was with her. Psalm 46, written for a group to sing. A song that the group would sing together, remembering how good God is. As I talked to my friend Michael and looked at it on my own, I realized 4 lessons jumped out to me, and I hope they jump out to you. First is that God will never leave us. God will never leave us. Those moments where we feel so alone and so much anguish, God's still there. He's promised He'll never leave us. And when things slide through His grid, when He allows trials to come into our life, His protection is still there. And His love is still there. Even though I can't understand it, it doesn't make sense to me. Why would my score be at 14.65, God? Why is my score outstanding? But God, you promise you'll never leave us. Psalm 46 says, God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. And I love about Psalm 46 is so many of the Psalms begin with a description of the crisis. But this Psalm begins a description of the God who's larger than the crisis. And I need Psalm 46 in my life. Because I often go to the crisis and say, here's where I'm at, God, I'm so scared. But the psalmist here begins with how great God is, that He's our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. He doesn't diminish the trouble, but he starts with the focus on the God who's never present help. that secret to confidence is knowing that God is near. It's not having it figured out, but knowing that God's near. Charles Spurgeon wrote, "This has nothing to do with the safety our strength inherent in the creature. We may be timid by nature, but God is our refuge. We are as weak by nature as bruised reeds, but God is our strength." It's not up to me to be strong and say, I'm going to make it through this. It's God who's there. No matter what, God never leaves us. And that lesson was so valuable for me to hear from my friend Michael sitting on the chair, speaking to me, speaking out of his own life, the grief of losing his 14-year-old son. Graduation's here. Their middle school is doing a special honor for Bryce. Bryce was an honor student. He was in the honors band, and they want to honor Bryce. So my friend Michael and his wife Gail are going to go to the graduation. I don't know how they sit through that. Seeing other boys and girls graduate. Well, their son has graduated to be with Jesus. My son pulled me aside after Bryce was killed. And hearing Michael's response and Gail's response, he said, "Dad, no offense, but I think Michael's faith is so much stronger than yours and Mom's." I said, "Son, no doubt. I can't imagine walking through this. But the psalmist knows that God is always there." Second lesson I learned is that situations aren't always as they appear. Situations aren't always like they seem. It's not what we visualize that really is the truth. Because God's there, we don't need to fear. We see the situation, but we may not see God there. But because God is there, we don't need to be afraid. See, the Proverbs says that the rock badgers are a feeble folk, yet they make their homes in the crags. See, even creatures run to their refuges. And if they run to a refuge, so should I. Proverbs is very clear that animals run to a place that's safe. In fact, Eugene Peterson, who translated the scriptures, he translated Psalm 46 and he says, God is a safe place to hide. Pretty good. God's a safe place to hide. It says, therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. He doesn't diminish what's happening. It's real. It's a fearful thing. It's hard. The mountains, the waters, it's a scary time. But because God is near, because God is our refuge and strength, and ever-present help in trouble, therefore we will not fear, even though all this is going on. Man, that was important for me to hear from Michael. I wasn't there yet, but I wanted to be there. What you don't see in your English Bible, the NIV, that you'd see in a Hebrew text, is that after verse 3 is a word, Selah. It's kind of a unique word. We don't really know exactly what it means. There's people who think they know what it means, but it's not really ever clearly exactly what it means. But this was a song. And they noted Selah after verse 3, verse 7, and verse 11, almost like a refrain. What they think it might mean, like in music, if you see the word forte, that means you'll sing this next part loud and brave and strong. When the singer saw the word Selah, Bible scholars think that what that meant was pause. Pause and let it sink in. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way, and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. Pause. God will never leave us. And situations aren't always as they appear. Third lesson was that when life seems hopeless, God is able. When life seems hopeless, God is not helpless. God is able. We have a God who is powerful. We have a God who is great and a God who is good, and those are a good combination. A great God who's not good is a scary God. A good God who's not great is just a nice guy. But a God who's great and good, that's powerful and kind. When life seems hopeless, God's able. The psalmist writes, "There's a river whose streams make glad the city of God. The holy place is where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar. Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice. The earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress." Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he's brought on the earth. He makes war cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow, shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. We have a God who is capable. They talk about a stream who make glad the city of God. City of God being Jerusalem in the text. And there's not really a river flowing through Jerusalem. But they see the future. And they say there'll be a river that'll flow right from the kingdom, right from the crown, right from the throne that'll flow through the city. They see the future that's not there yet. They see a God who's able to do things that don't make sense. And I so desperately wanted that sitting in the hospital room. The good news is this: I had your faith. So I was borrowing your faith. I was leaning on your faith. I was trusting in your faith. And God was using a guy like Michael to speak into my life and help me remember that when life seems hopeless, God is able. I didn't feel that sick. I mean, I realize now I was sick. I remember calling my wife and saying, "I think I'm going to die. I don't know if I'm going to make it home." But I just thought I was sick. I had no idea what was happening to my body. So I told the doctor, I said, "How am I going to know if I'm better or not?" He said, "Well, the scores will tell us." 14.65 topped out at 15, which is an impressive score. But the scores began to move down. And they were taking tests daily. And finally, when my score got into single digit, they said, "We can let you go home now. You're not better. But we can let you go home because your scores are improving." I got a score last week on Thursday. My score is now down to 2.87. So it's more normal. Still not healthy, but it's more normal. And I'm feeling better. And I got up this morning saying, "Hey, I feel good." And then I got on my way and started feeling sick to my stomach. I told Muff when I walked in, I don't feel real good, so glad you got a sermon just in case. But God is able. He's our refuge and fortress. In verse 7, he says our fortress. That's different than the verse 1 where he says the fortress. That's a good place to be hidden. But this fortress is like a high tower. It's an unreachable spot. Not just a fortress, not just a refuge. It's a high stronghold. It's something that's unbreakable, unreachable. It's our stronghold. It cannot be penetrated. We have a God who is strong and able to hide us, even if it feels like we're walking through a most horrible time. When I look around the room and realize some of us have walked through some really horrible times. And maybe like Lori's story, you wonder, God, where were you in that? But reality is we know this world's not our home. And we know that God is capable and God is able and God's protective and God has a plan, even though it doesn't make sense to us in 2019. Fourth lesson. One that I don't like a whole lot. Is a challenge. So 2 words in this whole chapter, this whole book that I don't like that much. He says, "Be still." There it is. Be still. That's almost like wait. That's like stop. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I'll be exalted in the earth. What I didn't see until I did some more study was that verse 10 is a key verse. Because everything before that has been in the third person. God, He breaks the bow, He breaks the shield, He does this, He does that, He makes a river, He does all this. But here's a shift to the first person. He says, be still and know that I am God. This is about Him. This is Him speaking. This is Jehovah. The psalmist writing, saying, here's what God says. He's saying, I am God. And He says, be still. And that's not just for us. That's also for the opposition. He's saying to the opposition, be still. Later, Jesus would be on the Sea of Galilee, and His disciples would be worried, and He'd look to the waves and He'd say, be still. See, it's not just for us, it's also for the opposition to be still and realize how great God is. That we have a God who breaks the bow, who shatters the spear, who burns the shields with fire. He makes war cease to the ends of the earth. So He says to the opposition, that which is opposing us, be still. But He also says it to me, be still. As I know how great God is, I can stop arguing with Him, stop opposing Him. Now I'm polite, so I don't do that to God, but in my mind I do it. And I can be still and know that He's God. Not just being quiet, but surrendering. Saying, God, I don't get this. But I'll be still and know that You're God. On May 1st, my friend Ron, who I didn't know before that, said, hey, tell me about the Wisdom Challenge. You up for it? I said, of course I am. I later wrote Ron because I said, Ron, I had no idea what was going to happen in my life. And neither did you, but God did. And I'm so thankful that you took His prompting and invited me in this. He knew that I'd need this. He knew that I would need this time to rest. Well, on May 21st, 10 days home from Africa, 5 days home from the hospital, I read Proverbs 21. Ron was reading also. We were writing each other what we were learning. Proverbs 21:31 just jumped out at me. The horse is made ready for the day of battle, but victory rests with the Lord. And I was convicted. Because, of course, I knew that the victory rested with the Lord. I knew that He was in charge. I wanted to trust Him with everything. I knew that I couldn't fix my kidneys. I knew that I couldn't fix anything in my life. But as I looked back over my life and over my ministry, I realized that even though I was trusting God for all the victory, man, I was spending a lot of time working on that horse. Strategizing, thinking, planning. There's nothing wrong with that. But I was putting my trust in the horse and not in the one who wrested the victory. And I just said, God, I'm so sorry. So much of my life has been saying I trust You and then working really hard so I can trust You. Psalm 46, be still. Know that I'm God. I've got a ways to go in this because God's getting me healthy. And I learned a lot of lessons. But I know there'll come a point where I'll go, whew, glad that's over. I can get back after it again. The horse is made ready for the day of battle, but victory rests with the Lord. Our job is to get ready for battle, but our ultimate job is to rest in the Lord. And I realized I wasn't there. Verse 11 repeats again, and this group of singers would sing this like our choir would here. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. I love that it ends with this. It talks about God Almighty being with us, that He's the King of the multitude. He's the King of the community. He's the King of all hosts. He's the God of this earth. Even though the earth does not recognize Him, He's the God of the earth. He's the Lord of the universe. He's King of kings and Lord of lords. But He's also the God of the individual. He's the God of Jacob. He's the God of you. He's the God of me. He's the God of difficult situations. He's the God of surprises. He's the God who reminds us that God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, even though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. Though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. Selah. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the most holy high dwells. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar. Kingdoms fall. He lifts His voice. The earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Selah. Come and see what the Lord has done. The desolations He's brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Selah. Pause and let that sink in. Let me pray for us. God, I thank You for all that we don't even know that we should be thanking You for Your blessings, for Your mercy, for the people You surrounded us with. We thank You that You are our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in times of trouble. God, You're a mighty fortress, a bulwark never failing. We know the enemy is strong and he's real and he's alive and active, but greater is He who's in us than he is in the world. We're going to lean upon You, God, and remember that You never leave us. You're able. You love us. So we thank You for today.